Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your host, Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm. Bob will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons.
Welcome to The Next Level. I'm glad you've joined us. I'm your host, Bob Gibbons. On the show, we talk to creators, innovators, and improvers. Whether you're an experienced entrepreneur or still searching for an idea that'll give you financial freedom, we hope this show will give you inspiration and tools to improve your journey. Now let's get to the show. Today's guest found his calling to help people in need of healing when he was only 22 years old and his newborn daughter had to spend 3 months in the neonatal intensive care unit. Since then, he's created companies that created simple tools for primary care physicians to use to diagnose people suffering from mental health disorders. So far, this has identified over 100,000 people in need of help and saved over 2,000 lives. Christian Lehinger's current company is called Connected Mind, and you can find them on the web at connectedmind.me. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So that's a heck of an introduction, and it certainly begs a heck of a lot of questions, and so we're excited to get to some of those questions. So let's start off with sort of your background. So I teed up with the story about your daughter. So tell us a little bit more about that, and what was it about that gave you the heart for helping people?
Sure. So my first daughter, when she was born, she was diagnosed with NEC, which is necrotizing enterocolitis. Basically, her colon was dying, and obviously she was born. We took her into the NICU. They didn't know there was a problem, and the next day they had to take her in for surgery and cut out a part of her colon. And it was very shocking as a kid. I was basically 21 years old, and I didn't know what was happening, and I saw the chaos, and I saw what was happening in the hospital, and I just really, at the time, fell in love with medicine and with what was happening with people there and how people needed help. Mm-hmm. And so that's what really got me interested in medicine, and I started at that time working at the hospital. Because I've always been a geek, so my job at the hospital was to help configure the systems and make sure that they were supported so that people could collect information, and that's what really got me interested in the subject, and that's what started me on my journey. So
interesting. So you were more of a technical guy to start with. So you were like configuring, writing programs or just more like maintaining networks and the computer systems and all that?
I was maintaining networks and the computer systems, but I saw at that time with the hospital, it was the early days of electronic medical records. It was kind of the wild west of medicine, medical IT or healthcare IT. So I saw what was happening there as they were starting to try to create the first example of interoperability, where all the different systems connected together, and they were trying to control all the information. And I realized at that time that really wasn't going to work. And the reason it wasn't going to work was because of the psychology of all of it, because people didn't want to give up their information and they didn't want to be controlled by a larger entity. So on my own dime, I went down to Los Alamos National Labs and met with the Advanced Computer Research Lab, the head of the Advanced Computer Research Lab, and learned about the first example of cloud computing and saw that there was an opportunity to allow people to own their own data while simultaneously sharing that information in a way that they could do research, but they wouldn't lose control.
So what time frame are we talking about? What year would this have been?
Oh gosh, that would have been 1999, I believe. 1999, I believe.
Okay, so that was really before the internet became mainstream and everybody was using it.
Yeah, exactly. So this was in the early days of, cloud computing, and we're seeing, a lot of different people trying to consolidate information, and this was an example of how it could be disparate or separated. And we're talking geek here, but at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is that if you don't have a meaningful way of sharing information, if you don't have a meaningful way of collecting data, if you don't have a meaningful way of analyzing that data, you can't help people. And if people are afraid to give their information, then there's no way to actually use it for research. So that's kind of the premise of everything. That's how it all started.
So you're a very young man at this point, and you go to Los Alamos. Why does that person that you're going to see at Los Alamos even meet with you? I mean, what did you say to get this guy or woman, I don't know which it was, to meet with you?
I just asked them.
You just told them what you were wanting to do.
Yeah, it was a friend of a friend, had a connection, and I just asked.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a great lesson. I mean, so many people would just see that as such a daunting task and wouldn't even, they would start with kind of the premise of my question, which was, why would they give you the time? And you just said, I'm not even going to ask that question. I'm just going to ask for what I want, and you got it.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I always teach my kids, if you just have confidence, you can pretty much do whatever you want. So that's how I've always operated.
So where did that lead after that meeting?
So I went back to the hospital and met with the CIO of the hospital and said, hey, this is what I did and this is what I see. And he gave me the little pat on the head and said, that's nice, kid, whatever. So I just quit my job and started an IT company to try to figure out a way to make all this happen. And ultimately, I ended up patenting an idea, not to be overly nerdy here, but, patent 7810145.
No, that's not nerdy at all.
Yeah, but
in fact, you even have that on your bio now that I mentioned. Say that number again.
7810145.
You were correct, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
That's amazing.
But the whole premise was a way of allowing people to share their information while still maintaining privacy. Because without privacy, you can't have liberty. And so the idea was to allow people to have that privacy while simultaneously allowing research to be done on the information. Because again, without the data, we don't know what's happening. We can't look for patterns. So
how long was it after you quit your job before you filed this patent?
It was a few years, actually. I think we filed it in 2004, I believe. So I guess technically it would have been 4 years.
Okay. So what did you do in the meantime for income?
Basically, was doing IT work for different clinics around town and growing a business, an IT business. That was kind of the core foundational business for everything that I built on top of it. And we were doing, consulting, and we were doing tech support, and then we were doing electronic medical records implementations. We were trying to actually make an impact in medicine through the IT side. And at one point, we actually realized that wasn't realistically going to solve the issue. We needed more information, and we needed to be more embedded in healthcare in a more meaningful way. And so that's what started the whole idea of actually owning clinics and running clinics. Now, obviously, in the state of Texas, you can't actually own a medical clinic, so there's kind of a convoluted way of doing it.
Unless you're a physician or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and I understand the physician assistants can own them now as well.
Yeah, that's relatively new development, but it didn't used to be that way either. So It was just physicians that could own clinics. So you create these management service organizations. But at the end of the day, to simplify the discussion, we basically owned medical clinics and started attacking it from that side, using them as a laboratory to develop software. So,
that's pretty amazing. If you can't get the clinics to participate, then you go buy the clinics so that you can control whether or not they participate.
Exactly.
So how did you go about buying a clinic or setting up the managed service, practice management group?
So became friends with the doctor up in McKinney, and actually that's why I ended up moving to Texas from Spokane, Washington, is because of that clinic. So we became friends with this doctor and just really enrolled him in what our vision was, and he was in agreement. We paid him some money, a good chunk of money actually, and started to run the clinic. And then very quickly we built up a whole, total of about 11 clinics that we were running, not all at the same time, but we were running these clinics. They were primary care clinics or family practice clinics, and they became our lab, our test bed for our software. And of course, we're able to make money off of all of this as well. But that's what we're up to.
And what did you do with your company that you had left in Spokane? Was that still churning away, or was that something you just let go or sold to somebody else?
We kept it.
Okay.
So we kept it and we kept running it. And since everything we did was able to be done remotely, and once in a while, if we actually had to go on site, we had people local that we could send in, but everything was pretty much remote.
Okay. So the people you had in Washington State were contractors. They weren't people that were 100% dedicated to you, but your contracts with your clients were more monitor remotely kind of things. And you're monitoring their systems, I assume?
Yeah, so we ended up converting from an hourly model to a residual income model, which, by the way, was a huge breakthrough for me personally, and really understanding how selling to live is a bad business model. So having that residual income and having the residual monitoring. So we built a managed service company out of it. So really, it was so rare that we ever had to contract with anybody in Spokane to go on site, because everything could be done remotely, that it probably only happened, maybe once every 6 months we would have to contract with someone for a few hours. But it was so rare that we didn't even have to have a full-time contractor at all. We just did it all remote.
Now, tell me a little bit more about the conversion of the pricing model. So instead of being priced by the hourly, you just charged a base monthly fee in perpetuity, or as long as they continue using you for the services?
Yeah, and on the geek side of the world, basically we went from an hourly model to a flat rate per computer and per server. So I believe it was like $50 a month per computer and $400 a month per server. And that was unlimited. You could call as many times as you want. You could have as many people as you wanted. We didn't care. We maintained everything, and we could really keep things moving, because if we actually paid attention to what was going on, people didn't have problems. So our big sale was, if you don't ever have to talk to us, we're doing our job.
Ah, gotcha.
So
I love that.
yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back after the break with Christian Lehinger.
Hi, my name is Fern, and I've been an empowered team member at Alkali for over 5 years. I first learned about Alkali through an online job board and was intrigued to learn that Alkali was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. But what captivated me was Alkali's mission statement, which is closely aligned with my own beliefs. So what's kept me at Alkali for over 5 years? First, Alkali's 5 core values match my own. Second, I've been empowered to use my unique abilities to impact our community, our clients, and Alkali. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an empowered Alkali team member, visit our website, alkaliservices.com. That's ALKALI services.com.
We're back. So, Chris, we were talking about the model that you had changed in your IT services company, where you're serving the medical clinics and such, and you're doing it remotely from Texas now back to Washington State. You're charging them monthly, so now you have consistent income. So when you're in Texas now, you're also doing the same thing with people here now. So at that point, is all your business either in Spokane, Washington, and or in the Dallas area, or do you also have clients elsewhere in the country at that point?
It's all over the country.
Okay.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong, this was not a super large company. I mean, it wasn't the majority of our income. Most of it was coming from the medical side, from running the medical clinics, but it was still a decent income, and it was always very consistent, and it was always consistent through all the years until we finally ended up selling it. So, yeah.
So when you're managing these medical clinics, what all does that entail? I assume personnel, IT, but are you also dealing with all the billing, the insurance companies, just everything that happens?
Yeah, so we did everything except the practice of medicine. So we did the billing, we did all of the workflow, we provided all of the staff for the front desk, for the medical assistants. We paid all the bills, we did all the HR, and of course we were able to use our IT background to automate a lot of that stuff and to make it really consistent. And so the clinics were very efficient and they worked really well. And again, keep in mind the reason that we're doing all of this is because we're trying to implement new concepts in medicine that hadn't been done before. And so we needed test beds, we needed laboratories, we needed to see what people would do and how they would behave. So we would, use, and I don't mean this to sound wrong, but we would use people as lab rats kind of. Actually, we started using lawyers instead of rats in our medical experiments because
so nobody cared.
Certain things that the rats wouldn't do. So no, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, we just lost our legal listeners, but anyway, all right. So give me more specifics. What were you trying to get? What data were you trying to extract from these clinics?
So it started out with us really trying to implement the patent and trying to get a way of making things interoperable. And we realized very quickly into that. So sorry, kind of to backtrack a little bit. So we ended up building something that we called Medical Groupware, which was essentially a kiosk check-in system that allowed patients to communicate over a portal. And we wanted to have a tool that would get us in the door, and then we could piggyback other products onto that until we got where we wanted to go. So that's what we were trying to do. And so the example of the lab rats is the kiosk. So to set up the kiosk, we actually built the kiosk, and then we sat in the clinic and we watched how people used it. And if they couldn't use it intuitively, meaning click and all the buttons, know exactly what to do without asking a single question or making a single mistake, we went back to the drawing board and did it again until we were actually able to build a kiosk that anybody could use intuitively without asking questions.
So this is intended to ultimately replace the person sitting at the desk when you walk in, to check in?
It's not so much to replace them, but it was to help them so that they could be more efficient, so that we could collect the insurance information and the demographics data in that more accurately. And again, we're not really so much interested in demographics data. We're interested in the other data, but this was an entry point, or at least we thought it was an entry point. We realized at some point that this was not an impactful enough issue to solve, and we weren't going to get the kind of footprint or traction that we needed. And we stumbled in 2011 really into the mental health arena. And not to get into too much detail, but in my family, there were issues with mental health that were causing problems in my family, and it was something that was near and dear to my heart, and I wanted a solution for it, but I hadn't even been thinking down this road, and just really kind of stumbled into the concept of, hey, we can actually make an impact in mental health using all this technology that we had just got done building for the kiosk and for Medical Groupware and for all this. So we ended up building a tool that tested for depression, anxiety, and several other mental health conditions, and it just took off.
Okay, so before we go too far down that road,
Okay.
which we certainly want to get there quickly, let's step back to the patent real quick then.
Sure.
So what exactly was the patent for?
So ultimately, the non-geekified version of this is that it was a way of making identity theft impossible. So your medical records were owned by you. So if a doctor collected the medical records, your body was the physical key that unlocked that data, so that when you would go to a different clinic, biometrically you could pull back your data, and the doctor could actually look at not only the data that they had collected, but also the data that other doctors had collected or other healthcare facilities had collected. But in the times when you're not physically present, that data was non-identified, so it could be researched, meaning it never was identified to start with. So, for example, chest pain radiating to the left arm only means something if you know it belongs to you.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just chest pain radiating to the left arm. So that data could be researched as discrete clinical elements without identifying who it belonged to. We would know it was an individual, but we wouldn't know who it was. And so that's where the research came in. But for you, that data could be stored all over the world on servers all over the world, and your biometrics would bring it back together and make it meaningful because now it's attached to your name so people know who it is. Does that make sense?
So does that also mean then that my medical records are accessible to anybody on that network, whether I've given them permission or not?
Well, they're accessible to the collector of the data only, but keep in mind the collector of the data has only collected a small piece of it. They haven't collected everything. So they have it identified in their system because they collected it, but they don't have access to all the data. And so that's the ultimate idea of it. Now, technology has moved to a different level since all of this happened. And so that's one of the reasons why during this pivot, we've kind of started to step back and get some new concepts around this. But that at the time, that's what we were going for.
Okay. So it really wasn't a repository of all medical records related to me necessarily. I mean, for example, if I have a doctor that I'm going to for some eye condition, and then I decide to change doctors, it seems like right now it takes an act of Congress almost to get that medical record to actually transfer to the new doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Does your tool solve that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about it because as soon as you went to the new doctor, your biometrics would pull that data forward.
But it's only for those people that are on that system or that network?
Yeah, the physicians would have to be on the network. So obviously the idea was that instead of having a centralized set of repositories like HIEs or health information exchanges, the data would actually be stored wherever it's collected, and we would have a way of pulling that data back. So it's a federated model for interoperability. And so far, we've actually gone down the road nationally. We've gone down the road of having repositories, and there's a lot of issues with that. In some respects, it works, and in some respects, it really doesn't work. And again, he who owns the data owns the world, and so there's a lot of fighting and infighting over who's going to own the data, and that's one of the reasons why we felt so strongly that that wouldn't work, because of psychology, not because of technology.
I got you.
Does that make sense?
Now, you used the word federated. What did you mean by using that word?
Split all apart.
Okay.
Yeah, so everything's split all apart. And again, the concept around this is that we focus on privacy first. Not to be too geeky, but you can have security without privacy, but you can't have privacy without security. So we focused on the privacy, and the best way to keep things private, obviously security on top of that, is to not have all of it in one place. So.
Okay. So you're working on all these systems, you're managing all these clinics, and you happen upon the mental health aspect. And what was it about that sort of popped out and rose to the top as saying, hey, here's the real opportunity?
We realized, one, that doctors could make a significant amount of money for doing the right thing, and that was something that we hadn't seen before in a lot of areas of medicine. A lot of the incentives in medicine are not aligned to actually treating the patient the way they need to be treated, and there was an opportunity here where the doctors could treat the patients. Just so you know, statistically, 1 in 4 adults in the United States is suffering from a mental health condition. And most of those patients end up getting found in the primary care specialist doctor's office because there's not enough psychologists and psychiatrists to actually treat them. And also, another statistic is that just for depression alone, 69% of all patients diagnosed with depression presented to the doctor with only a physical symptom, meaning they didn't know they were depressed or they were too afraid to talk about it. They came in with like stomach pain or teeth pain or something else that was comorbid to the depression, but they didn't say, I'm depressed. A lot of people aren't actually self-aware enough to know that they're depressed. And so it ends up affecting physical medicine. So the primary care and specialists need to be testing for this. Every major medical association basically on the planet is saying, hey, you've got to be testing for mental health conditions because it's affecting physical medicine. But there aren't effective tools for doing that, and we found a way of doing that, and also a way for the doctors to get paid for doing the right thing. So that's how we went down that road.
So your real hook to the docs are you're going to make more money, but the ultimate goal really is to help more people be more holistically treated.
Basically, and we call it the iron triangle, which is cash, care, and compliance. So depending on what motivates a particular physician, whether it's cash or better care or compliance, and we would all hope it's better care. That's not always the case. But for the most part, doctors want to treat their patients better. So we hit it from all three angles. And that's how we talk about it.
Yeah, I can see that making a big difference. If
Yeah.
you're hitting all three, that's really going to speak to
Yeah.
everybody, to all parties in it's the classic win-win, but this is the win-win-win.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
three of them are being hit.
Exactly.
Okay, very interesting. So I'm really interested in the growth of this company. And how did you fund all of this? You started off at a pretty young age. Did you have partners? Did you have investors? How did you scale this?
So in the beginning, I had partners, but we really bootstrapped this thing and used the residual income model to, build the revenue, then grow to match, then build the revenue, then grow to match. And ultimately, we ended up getting some investment capital, a mixture of angel investors, and then ultimately private equity. And that's how we were able to actually, take it to the next level and grow it.
And was the private equity, was that just an investment, or were they like co-managing it, or how did that look?
So it was an investment. They did have seats on the board, and ultimately, that whole situation didn't turn out real great for the founders, as it often doesn't. So,
and you were a founder.
yes. So I ended up losing my baby in that deal.
Wow.
But yeah, so it was that really was the most difficult time in my life by far, but it was the best time in my life. And I learned so many lessons going through that I would not trade for the world. I would do it again in a second. But that's what really led me to the new company that I built, and how I'm building this is just completely different.
So give us some of those lessons.
So the biggest lessons in the past, I really believe that pushing and efforting and striving and staying up late and working 12 hours a day and not being there when my kids needed me sometimes, or traveling a lot, I thought that was the sacrifices that were necessary to actually make this happen. And I always had the end in mind, and I was always striving for this end goal. And I missed the point that it's really not about the end goal. It's really about the journey, and it's about being present, and it's about being there and really allowing things to happen. And that was the big lesson that I learned. And with this new company, and by the way, kind of stepping back a little, my life really was not in alignment personally during that time. I would make sacrifices I didn't want to make. I would do things, and not immoral things, but I would do things I didn't want to do because I needed to make a sacrifice to make the company go, to save all these people and this big vision. But the fact of the matter was that I needed to go through that to learn the lesson, but that's not what was really necessary to make an impact. And this new company, Connected Mind, that I'm building is just completely different. It's really built on the laws of attraction and allowing and collaboration, and really enrolling people in what's possible, and enrolling people in a vision, and really letting people do what people do best, which is just spread the message to enroll other people. And we're so much simpler. It's so much easier. It's so much more natural. There's not a push or a fight. And it was a huge lesson learned. I took the last couple of years after losing my company just to retool life. And it was really hard, but it's been absolutely amazing.
So you're thinking that you couldn't have come to this understanding had you not gone through that process of having lost the company.
Yeah, and I think it's probably because I was a little bit too stubborn to actually get it. Sometimes, I need to get hit in the head with a 2x4 before I can realize that, oh, that's not the right direction.
So what could you have done, or what did you do wrong, and that's a negative way of asking the question. I don't mean it that way, but how could you have avoided losing the company? Was it the way the contracts are written with the PE firm, or were there other issues?
It really would have had to start before the private equity group came in at all. And, the old joke is, if the relationship is bad, let's have a baby. That doesn't work really well. So at the end of the day, that's really what happened. I didn't have solid relationships with my partners. We were not in alignment. And so we decided, let's get some investment money. That'll fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being, trivial about it, but that's kind of the long and short of it. And so the whole thing was out of alignment right from that point forward. And really looking back, If I would have made a shift, what would have happened is at that time I would have needed to shift away and retool and then redo it. But again, hindsight is 50-50, but we don't know what would have happened if I would have stepped away. I could have got hit by a car the second I walked out the door. I could, so much could have changed. You just don't know.
You can't
know
live
what I mean?
two lives concurrently to know which one was the right one.
Exactly, and there isn't a right one, because at the end of the day, we get to create the world we live in, and that's so exciting. And I actually get that at a real deep level now, and having gone through the pain was what really made that happen.
So were you, I assume that you were a minority partner at that point. Once you had PE investments, you no longer had controlling interest.
And this is, again, starting off on the wrong foot. I was always a minority partner, even though I was bringing all the ideas and all the work and the process and everything, because I thought I needed all these people around me to make it successful. And that just wasn't reality. And that was just my own insecurities that were at play there. And it started really from day one. So
okay. So in all of that, who got the patent?
It's still with the
other company.
Yeah, with the other company.
Okay. So you still get to say you own it, you created it, you got it, but you can't use it?
Correct. I can't use it.
Interesting. So you lose control of the company, you leave. What did you, did you immediately start Connected Mind, or what happened in that interim period?
No, I actually wanted to know that I was building this company for the right reasons. I didn't want to do it out of revenge. I didn't want to do it to be more successful. They say the best success is, or the best revenge is success.
Right.
I didn't want to be that. I wanted this to be what I wanted to do because it was something I believed in and I cared about and I actually had a vision for. And so I waited about 6 months and really soul searched, did a lot of research, a lot of market research, just to make sure that, I wasn't blowing smoke up my own backside in doing this.
Right.
And when I realized, no, I really do have a passion for this, I really do believe that we can make an impact on the world by bringing focus on this, then that's when I decided to go ahead and build it. And I wanted to build it in a way that was going to work. And so I didn't want it to be a knee-jerk reaction, kind of a rebound relationship type of mindset.
Yeah. So are you starting it with the whole managing the medical practices and managing their IT and all of that stuff? Or are you really just more narrowly focused on the mental health piece?
We're just focused on the mental health piece.
Okay.
And we picked the 6 conditions that most affect physical medicine, and we're laser focused on that. And that, again, was a big lesson learned. And although I did learn amazing things from having all those moving parts, the truth is I would have been more effective if I would have just focused on one thing and really made that great.
I see.
And that's what we're doing with this company. And again, don't get me wrong, the other company was successful from the standpoint that it made money and all those things, but it wasn't successful from the standpoint that it wasn't aligned and it wasn't in integrity, meaning not integrity, meaning alignment.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So give us the rundown on exactly what Connected Mind is and what it does.
Sure. So it is a mental health assessment tool, very similar to the previous one that I had built, but it's done in a way that it actually screens for the physician with 8 questions, and if a patient actually answers positive to any of those questions, it then begins to start digging. So one of the biggest problems with the current tools that are out there is a doctor almost has to pre-diagnose you to determine which tests to run. So, it looks like you have depression. Let me give you a depression test. Or it looks like you have anxiety. Let me give you an anxiety test. The problem is those conditions are often very comorbid to each other. They don't always know what's actually going on. You could have bipolar disorder or something else completely, but unless they had thought to run that particular test, they miss it. The other thing is that they have to log in, they have to choose a patient, they have to pick a test and then give it to you. Well, ours is all run from a kiosk, and it's designed to really just give to every single person every single time they come in. And most people don't trigger anything. It's just 8 questions, it's done. But for the 1 in 4, that do trigger something, it digs, and it's designed to end as fast as possible if there isn't an issue. But if there is an issue, it's designed to actually get the most complete information that it can so that a doctor can look at it and not have to quote unquote uncork the bottle to find out if you're suicidal or find out if bereavement or something else is going on with you. It does all that for them. So they walk in that room knowing exactly what they need to do. And if they want to ask more questions, they most certainly can. But it's done all of the heavy lifting for them. So they actually have a better chance of accurately diagnosing and determining what their next steps are.
So if I go into my internist or my family practice physician or, a woman goes into the OBGYN, they walk in for some other reason. I go in for my annual physical, let's say, and I'm given an iPad or some sort of screen, and I answer these 8 questions. And then if I answer them properly, quote, properly, then I have no issues, and that doesn't come up in my visit with the doctor. But if I answer yes to any of those, it digs deeper, keeps analyzing what I'm experiencing, and then that doctor can deal with it when we get in that room together. Even though I think I'm only there for that for that physical, he's now going to have the opportunity to dig deeper on this other issue, mental health issue as well.
Yep, absolutely. And why that's so important, I'll give you one statistic for heart disease. If you actually have a heart attack and you also have depression, you're 300% more likely to have a second heart attack. So these conditions are connected. If you have diabetes and you suffer from depression, you're less likely to be able to control your diabetes. Everything is connected to everything else. I mean, as a human, we're way more than our physical. The mental actually affects so much of the physical, and if that's ignored, we miss what we need to do to actually treat patients.
It sounds like a great reason to have it. I love hearing that. Well, let's take another quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts when you negotiate for that renewal option. Why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at texastenantrep.com. That's texastenantrep.com. Welcome back to The Next Level. We're here with Christian Lehinger of Connected Mind, and you can find out more at connectedmind.me. So Christian, talk to me just a little bit more about the way this product works, because when I walk in the door and I'm given this screen and I'm answering these questions, the clinic has to have had some sort of training. There has to have been something they've done up to that point to figure out how to use this thing. So I assume you're providing not just the product, but you're providing training and education on how this thing works and what they're supposed to do with it.
Sure, absolutely. And we do that in a couple of different ways. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/connectedmind, and that explains all the different facets of it. But again, this product, I always say, its elegance is in its simplicity. It's so easy to use that it really doesn't take any training to actually get it going. The biggest training is on how to bill it to insurance and how to actually look at the test results and what they mean. Even that, though, is very intuitive. So really, doctors, for the most part, just look at it. They know exactly what's going on.
So by providing this test, they get to bill insurance for this?
Correct. Yeah, and there's up to 5, but really 4 CPT codes, which are billing codes that they can use to bill this to insurance.
So even though they're not considered a mental health provider, they're not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, whatever, they still can bill for having done this screen.
Correct. And the reason why is because all the major medical associations and CMS, Medicare basically recognizes the fact that primary care and specialists are dealing with mental health, or they can't manage physical medicine. And so that's why these codes actually exist, because they recognize that it's necessary to be done in these clinical settings.
So, and it also, I assume, gives them the opportunity to then refer the patient to somebody else, a psychiatrist, psychologist, et cetera, if that's needed.
Correct.
To go that further. So the pricing model for the doctor is I get to bill for having done a screen, which is really automated anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So is your pricing model to the doctor a flat fee? Do you price per screening given? I mean, what's the business model look like for you?
Sure. We actually price this at a flat subscription per provider, and we don't have any real rules around what we consider, how many providers you have in the clinic versus how many you actually pay for. Like some systems that are out there, they'll actually say, okay, how many providers do you have? Well, it's mandatory that all of them are on the system. For us, our only goal is to screen patients and get the patients that are suffering from a condition, get them help. And so we've priced this very low. Our goal is to get mass adoption as fast as we possibly can, because we're actually playing a game in the world to help people, and that's what we're all about, and that's what we care about.
So are you saying that if I go to a one doctor practice, or you sell this to a 10 doctor practice, they're paying the same amount?
No, what I'm trying to say, and I'm probably not being super clear on that, is in that 10 doctor group, if 8 of them want to use it and 2 don't, fine, whatever. We don't care. We just want at least one of those doctors using it. Now, if all 10 of them are using it, yeah, there's a subscription price for all 10, but still it's so low that the return on investment is 100x over what they would actually pay.
I got you. So it's for the doctors that are using them. If all 10 use them, you pay for 10 users. If only 8 of them do it, you pay for 8. I got you.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So so how do you market this?
Right now we're marketing it a couple of different ways. We have value-added resellers. We're doing integrations into other products where other products can actually use our test inside of their product to give mental health assessments. And then lastly, we're doing digital marketing where we're actually, putting it out on the LinkedIns and the Facebooks and the web. But by far, our biggest focus is on value-added resellers and on integrations. And we're designed from the ground up to integrate, so we can integrate with anything very quickly.
So that would be what other industries would call channel partners.
Mm-hmm.
So the integrators and et cetera. So that's sort of a channel partner. And the other way where you're going digital, that's really trying to get to the end user directly. It's kind of like the pharmaceuticals where they're advertising on TV for, pick your poison. you have to get a prescription to get it, but they're still selling to the end user. You're doing the same thing on the digital marketing.
Yeah, and we need to really get the mass adoption to get this thing to go viral before we can go full into the digital side. And that's why we do have feet on the street, and that's why we do the integration side, just because it takes time to get that momentum going.
Sure.
But it is going.
And is this only for primary care physicians? So family practice, internist. I mean, what other kinds of specialists would this be appropriate for?
Any specialist that's dealing with a condition that's comorbid to depression or anxiety or any of the other conditions that we're dealing with. So endocrinology, GI, a lot of GI or gastroenterologists, what they deal with is actually psychologically related, like irritable bowel syndrome, for example. So any specialist that's dealing with a condition comorbid to what we test for is somebody we're looking for. But primary care is really 100% slam dunk for us, because they are absolutely dealing with those conditions on a daily basis.
And so that would be OBGYN as well?
Yep, OBGYNs.
What about pediatrics?
Pediatrics, our test works for 12 and up.
Okay.
So it's not for the younger kids, but it is, it absolutely works in pediatrics as well.
And does this test work across cultures? So if you have somebody from another country who happens to come and live here, would the test still make sense for them, or do you see differences based on cultures?
We actually have the test in Spanish and English, and we're designed to be able to translate it very quickly into any other language. The next language we'll be doing is Vietnamese, because that's the third most common language spoken in Texas and California. But as far as somebody who is not a native English speaker, they are going to tend to struggle a little bit more. So it is better if they can do it in their native language, but it's still better than not doing anything at all.
And I guess I wasn't even thinking about it being in a language. I see how that would make sense, but I guess I was thinking is the way the questions are stated, will that have the same result for somebody who was raised in India or Pakistan or Australia even, as for somebody who was raised in the U.S.?
Again, if you're not a native speaker, and each language is going to have its own nuances. So we're talking culture, but at the end of the day, really using
really
those synonymously.
Issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
People do tend to struggle more, getting those concepts. But when we translate it into another language, we translate those concepts as well. So
Gotcha.
we have it in English and Spanish right now.
Okay. So you're focused on the medical world right now for obvious reasons. Pardon me. Are there other industries that this would be appropriate for? Like I'm thinking law enforcement. Law enforcement deals with a lot of people with mental health issues. Is there an application of this to that or to other industries?
There probably is in those other industries, but the big industry that we're really focused on next would be schools, making same test, but ultimately have the reporting so that it's not diagnostic. I mean, we're not diagnostic, but meaning it's not showing all of the details, but that it's saying, hey, this person has a risk for depression, and they also mark the box, I intend to kill myself. So that's really important in the school setting, and our ultimate goal really would be in that to help eliminate school shootings by identifying the at-risk students. And including bullying and things like that in that. And so that's on our roadmap. Within 3 years, we'd like to have 20 independent school districts using our test. We may even do that as some type of not-for-profit and really link it to the healthcare side where, say, Texas Health Resource ends up implementing the product and they get to sponsor 3 school districts in their area and they get that at no charge. That's kind of the way we're thinking about it.
Yeah, education, that seems like a really good avenue to get this out because, given your mission to save lives, to help people who are suffering from mental health problems of one sort or another, that seems like that's a way to get it out there in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so what are some of the big insights that you feel like you've come to, understandings you've come to through your journey of starting other companies and growing them and now with Connected Mind?
I think the biggest thing for me could be summed up with saying be, do, have instead of have, do, be, meaning
be, do, have instead of have,
do, be,
okay.
Meaning be what you want to be aligned to that you want to be, and the doing will follow that, and then the having comes, versus feeling like you have to have certain things in place in order to take certain actions so you can be happy or so you can be what you want to be. That's not aligned, and it doesn't work. And I learned that lesson, that if you want to be a certain way, if you want to be happy, be happy. The rest of the stuff comes from that. That's the basis of all of it, is the being. And that's something that I really learned, and really allowing what is to be, meaning allowing, the kind of following the river, meaning not striving and pushing and trying to make things happen, but just getting present and really seeing what's actually out there, and then making a choice from there on what you're going to do. And if something's not working, worrying about it and pushing and trying to make it happen just doesn't really work. Just really focusing on the being is really the big lesson. So does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. It could certainly fill a whole show by itself.
Probably true.
Dealing with that. But, I tell me if this makes any sense. So in a way, I'm trying to put a tangible example around that.
Sure.
So if somebody starts with the having, which is the not the right way, according to what you're just saying, and so they're focused on having the right car, having the right vacations, having the right clothing, all the stuff. They go out and get the house, and they have to get loans for all this stuff. So they're now leveraged. They're really stuck in having to have a job that earns a certain amount of money. And so that if that job happens to be something that doesn't make them happy, they kind of have sort of put themselves in a prison of all their stuff and the debt that comes along with that. Whereas it sounds like you're saying if they'd have started with, well, who do they want to be in life, and then let that determine what they should have at the end, that would make more sense. And a lot of the stuff they have, they probably don't really need or want anyway. Doesn't really make them happy.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. That's basically what I'm saying. Yeah. And I'll give you one example. Oh, are we out of time?
We're out of time.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry. We got so much into that. I totally forgot.
No worries.
To look at the clock. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right. Well, for our listeners, please go to connectedmind.me to learn more, and go to nextlevelshow.com to learn more about the show. We'll see you next week with another great guest.